Hello, my name is Wendy Whittick. Welcome to Classic Film, Montgomery Clift, and Other Great Actors podcast. Today we'll be talking about Rudolph Valentino. Rudolph Valentino, was he cursed? The name Valentino just conjures up this idea of a romantic Latin lover. Dubbed the Great Lover in his short time in Hollywood, he was the heartthrob of the silent era, adored by women worldwide. Sadly, though, he had little success in his own love life, and his personal life was fraught with scandals, though many through little fault of his own. Though his life was cut short, his legacy lives on. This is the tragic story of the one and only Rudolph Valentino. Born May 6, 1895 in Italy, specifically Castellaneta, Apulia, Kingdom of Italy, he was saddled with no less than 8 names: Rodolfo, Alfonso, Raffaello, Pierre, Filiberto, Guglielmi, di Valente, di Antongilla. Imagine that written on the movie credits. His father, a veteran of the Italian army, died tragically from malaria. Rudolph, Rudy, was only 11 years of age. He was greatly affected by this and grew close to his mother and younger sister Maria. He was a very beautiful child and often spoiled by his mother. He was not a good student and eventually was enrolled in agricultural school, where he did have some success. He did seem to enjoy gardening in particular. However, there was little work for him in Italy at that time, so he hopped a ship to the United States. He arrived in New York at age 18 and began working various jobs, including doing some gardening. He was sometimes homeless during this period and would do what he could to earn enough money to live. There's much speculation what all that could have been. Eventually, he did get some work as a tango dancer in a restaurant. Rudy was an excellent dancer and worked as a dancer for a time. Rudy was involved in a series of costly misadventures while in New York. As mentioned before, he managed to somewhat innocently get caught up in scandals. The problems arose when he befriended an heiress named Blanca de Sal. Quite possibly it was more than just a friendship, but no one can say for sure. Regardless, Blanca was at the time married to John de Sal, with whom she had a son. Blanca accused John of infidelity and petitioned for divorce. For some odd reason, she convinced Rudy to act as a witness on her part about these infidelities. Rudy did agree to do so. It should be noted that Rudy was a somewhat passive, agreeable person and easily manipulated. Though this seems rather innocuous, it caused somewhat serious repercussions for Rudy at the time. The ex-husband John had some political friends, and he got them to exert their influence to get Rudy arrested. He happened at the time to live near a house of ill repute, and, for whatever reason, was in or near the house at such time that a raid was conveniently taking place. He was arrested on a vice charge and spent several days in jail. Whatever evidence they had managed to produce was not enough to sustain the charge, and he was released. However, this was enough of a scandal to cause Rudy to have trouble getting employment, and the matter was hardly helped when Blanca then shot and killed the ex-husband over a custody battle. He thought it best to hightail it out of town before he could get called in to yet another trial. Rudy was able to join a traveling musical company that took him to Utah and then picked up another traveling production that then took him to Los Angeles. He wound up, during his various stage theatricals, meeting actor Norman Carey, who befriended him, invited him to room with him in Los Angeles, and suggested he try for a career in movies. However, Rudy was doing fairly well teaching rich old ladies to dance. He was quite popular in that regard. This gave him enough income to find his own place and to begin looking for screen roles. He did get some roles in movies, but because of his dark and swarthy complexion, he was getting typecast as villains and gangsters. He went on in these kind of parts for some time until screenwriter June Mathis noticed him in a film called Eyes of Youth. Around this time, he had developed a great friendship with Jean Acker. Although she was definitely a lesbian, he, for some reason, decided to marry her. It is reputed this marriage was never consummated. This would cause great trouble for Rudy down the line. June Mathis tracked down Rudy. He had disappeared off to New York for a while, typical that he would go off when his big break was around the corner, and offered him a role of Julio Desnoyers in the film 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Rudy agreed, having just, by coincidence, read the novel. He was directed by Rex Ingram, who he did not get along with. However, when the film was released, it was a huge box office hit and the 6th highest grossing silent film ever. It's very possible that Rudy had a lot to do with this film's success. This was his first major role and his first kind of romantic lead. He dances the tango in this film, and it grabbed the attention of women all over the U.S. Indeed, it is something to see. Despite the huge success of Four Horsemen, Metro, the studio that had produced the movie and signed Rudy, treated Rudy quite shabbily. They refused to pay him any more money. He was only earning $350 a week, not much even then for a leading actor, and then gave him just a minor role in a B movie, Uncharted Seas. It probably did stir up some resentment with Rudy towards Metro. However, he wound up meeting Natasha Rambova on this film, and he was quite smitten with her. His next movie, Camille, was with Alla Nazimova, who was a fairly powerful figure back in the silent movie days. As a matter of fact, he met first wife Jean Acker through her and her sewing circle. June Mathis was also involved, as well as Natasha Rambova, who was a costume and set designer. Nazimova didn't care to have Valentino upstaging her, so his part was greatly reduced, causing the public to shun the film. Valentino then made another film with June Mathis as screenwriter called The Conquering Power. This was also not a box office success, though it was liked by critics. At this point, Rudy was fed up with Metro and the lack of respect, the poor movies, and the poor salary. He quit Metro and signed with Famous Players Lasky, a precursor to Paramount. Luckily, Jesse Lasky was able to recognize that Valentino had a star quality and cast him in the movie The Sheik, where he plays an Arabic sheik who steals away a white woman who has captured his eye. He's very dominant and aggressive in this movie, but over the course of the movie becomes more caring, respectful, and loving towards his captive. He also comes to her rescue when she is kidnapped a second time by a very evil bandit. This film was a huge success and really brought about the whole great lover or Latin lover title that he would be saddled with thereafter. Rudy then did a couple of movies for Famous Players that were not especially big box office hits, such as Moran of the Lady Lefty and Beyond the Rocks, which was thought lost but discovered in 2002 and restored, before embarking in the lead role in Blood and Sand 1922. Valentino played a bullfighter in this movie and is very effective in this role. This film was a huge hit with both critics and moviegoers, becoming one of the 4 top grossing movies of 1922. Rudy himself was fond of this film, considering it one of his best. Rudy at this point went to Mexico to marry Natasha Rambova. Though divorced from Jean Acker, it was apparently necessary to not remarry within a year's time by California law. Therefore, he was again pulled into the headlines as he was tried for bigamy. My guess would be that this was completely unintentional on Rudy's part. I'm sure he was as surprised as anyone when he was charged with bigamy, but it's just one of those unlucky things that seemed to follow him. Rudy and Natasha were forced to annul their marriage and live apart for a year, which obviously put a bit of strain on their relationship. They did, however, legally remarry in 1923. Rudy then did another film, The Young Raja, which was, again, not all that well received. Also, this film is mostly lost as well. Rudy was now feeling disenchanted with Famous Players, and instead of continuing with the next picture slated for him, The Spanish Cavalier, he chose to go on strike, which basically meant refusing to act in any movies until his demands were met. He was making $1,250 per week, more than previously, and certainly more than most people in the 1920s. However, he was making considerably less than comparable stars. He was also angry that Famous Players had broken numerous promises to him about shooting on location. I would also think that Natasha might have been egging him on a bit in this regard as well. He refused checks from Famous Players, which also meant he was not paying the debt he owed them. This caused them to file a lawsuit against him. However, this failed to change his stance on the matter. Famous Players then agreed to raise his salary to $7,000 a week, but carelessly let it slip that he was signing a new contract rather than just getting a raise. Therefore, Rudy rejected this offer. Rudy also at this time wrote an open letter in Photoplay magazine to the American public stating his reasons for this continued strike. Other studios sent in offers, but Famous Players used their legal rights within their contract with Rudy to prevent him from accepting employment with other studios. Rudy was deeply in debt and did need money, but refused to deal with Famous Players. He filed an appeal to be released from the contract and was permitted to accept other types of employment, just not employment as an actor. Thus began the Mineral Lava Dance Tour, where he would tour the US and Canada doing dance numbers with Natasha Rambova, who was quite a talented dancer in her own right. This was quite successful. Eventually, he was contracted for film work by Ritz-Carlton Pictures. They were working through Famous Players, and he negotiated 2 pictures with Famous Players and 4 with Ritz-Carlton. Part of this contract allowed Natasha to work on his films. She had extreme influence on him, even more so than the directors. As in the past, directors despised her and wanted her off the films. It also didn't help Rudy in any way. She had a very artsy, avant-garde ideal and kept putting Rudy in period pieces, such as Monsieur Beaucaire, playing a duke and dressed foppishly. No better was the next picture, A Sainted Devil, which was a lost film. The public did not want Rudy in fancy period dress playing gentry. They wanted him playing savage and swarthy characters like the Sheik and bullfighters. Also, the costumes looked somewhat effeminate to the American public, and there started to be talk about Rudy. Having married Jean Acker hadn't helped him in that regard either. Rudy was now free of Famous Players and moved on to his pictures with Ritz-Carlton. His first picture was The Hooded Falcon, with script by old friend June Mathis. Unfortunately, the script didn't meet with the approval of the Valentinos. Natasha was still very heavily involved in everything related to Rudy's movies, and they demanded a rewrite, which offended June and caused a huge rift in her relationship with Rudy. Again, this speaks more of Natasha's behavior to me than Rudy's. June Mathis, we must remember, is the person who discovered and made Rudy the star he was, and was a great friend of Rudy's. Since that production now had to be reworked, Rudy was asked to film the next movie, Cobra, instead. After finishing Cobra, Rudy's intentions were to get to The Hooded Falcon. Alas, another fiasco. First, people were up in arms because Rudy grew a beard for the role and was seen out and about displaying said beard. Women everywhere produced a huge outcry, and he was forced to publicly have the beard shaved to appease them. Further, Natasha and her preparations had gone far over budget, or the budget was not what Ritz-Carlton had originally stated, and Ritz-Carlton now terminated the deal with both Rudy and Natasha, and the film was not made. Enter now Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks representing United Artists, their production company. They were very interested in signing Rudy and offered $10,000 a week plus a percentage of the gross. However, they were adamant at not having Natasha be involved in any way with production, in fact, not even being allowed on set. Rudy agreed to that provision, and it created an irrevocable rift in their marriage, which career-wise was probably beneficial to Rudy, but he seemed to truly love her, and it devastated him quite a bit. However, it restored many of his old friends to him who had vanished during his time with Natasha, including June Mathis. Rudy started work on The Eagle for United Artists. This movie was well received with critics, but didn't do as well at the box office. Again, though, this movie showcases Rudy's ability to do comedy. After this movie was wrapped up, Rudy fled to Europe for a time, mourning over the loss of his marriage. He finally returned in 1926 to shoot The Son of the Sheik, which was a follow-up to his earlier successful movie, The Sheik. He actually plays 2 roles in this, the now older original Sheik and also the son. He again starred with Vilma Bansky and performed quite well in this movie with the dual roles. To no one's surprise, this movie was a huge hit. The public was very clear about what kind of roles they wanted from Rudy, which was somewhat unfair as it limited him as an actor. Also unfair was the fact that now journalists were questioning Rudy's masculinity. Some loony journalists from the Chicago Tribune chose to connect a pink powder dispensing vending machine in a men's washroom with Rudy. The whole thing is bizarre and the sort of unfortunate tangle Rudy would get into through no fault of his own. Rudy became angry about the article and challenged the writer to a boxing match. Rudy had taken boxing lessons from Jack Dempsey and was a fairly proficient boxer. Naturally, the journalist chose to hide behind his words and paper and would not meet up to box with Rudy. However, another journalist who wrote for the New York paper as the boxing expert volunteered to fight Rudy instead. Rudy won the match. Rudy was also an avid fencer, so one actually wishes duels had been legal at the time. Truthfully, Rudy was extremely athletic and fit, an excellent boxer, fencer, and proficient horseman, plus his obvious skill and talent in dancing. Jack Dempsey even called him the most virile and masculine of men. Though there have been sensationalist, unsubstantiated books proclaiming he was homosexual, it seems the people who knew him disagreed. One former roommate in particular, Paul Ivano, said he was definitely heterosexual. His biographers, Emily Leader and Alan Ellenberger, also concur that he was not gay. At the time of shooting Son of the Sheik, Rudy was dating Pola Negri. He seemed to be unwell during the shooting of that movie, but pressed on. However, afterwards he collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. He had gastric ulcers which needed immediate surgery. He came through the surgery just fine. Unfortunately, an infection set in, and they had little medication at the time to combat such infections. He continued to worsen, and doctors realized he wouldn't make it. They kept this information from Rudy, and he believed he would get better. He chatted about going fishing, and reportedly the last thing he said was something to the effect of, "Pull up the blinds, I feel fine." Tragically, though, he was not fine, and died on August 23, 1926, at age 31. His funeral was a huge mob scene with over 10,000 people lining the streets, women committing suicide, and Pola Negri collapsed hysterically whenever in view of the cameras. Despite all the acclaim, there was no arrangements for a place to bury Rudy, so one of his first friends, June Mathis, came to the rescue, allowing him a temporary place in a crypt she purchased for herself and her husband. She then died the following year and was placed in the crypt with Rudy, and there they remain to this day. Rudy died before the advent of the talking picture. However, we do have a brief glimpse of his singing voice. I want to leave you with this. That's the end of Rudolph Valentino, Was He Cursed? Please join us for more podcasts from classic film, Montgomery Clift, and other great actors.